I'm Jessie Beckett-Parr. I'm the Chief Program Officer for CCOF, California Certified Organic Farmers. And in that capacity, I get to oversee the CCOF Foundation, which handles all of our education and grant making. And I also oversee our policy and advocacy team that works on the state and federal level to advocate for organic producers. And this is an opportunity, it's really kind of a community education event to bring people together to talk about current issues in organic and connect with some of the programs that the foundation runs, and also hear directly from our policy and advocacy team, kind of a blend of things that CCOF has going, and hear directly from producers on the ground about what is happening for them and what's current challenges and opportunities. So this is going to be a conversation primarily between Laetitia Benador, who's our senior policy advocate, Albert Straus, and Joseph Button from Straus Family Creamery. But we also want it to be helpful for you all and in tune with what you all are experiencing out there. So feel free to put in questions into the chat at any point. And depending on how the conversation goes, we may have like a larger question and answer session at the end as well. But you're welcome to just kind of populate as things are going on. And Laetitia will be as responsive as possible because Laetitia is going to be the moderator. And then this meeting is being recorded. So if you have colleagues that are interested in hearing more about this conversation later, it will be sent out to folks and also put up on the CCOF YouTube page, which has a whole lot of interesting information on it. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce Laetitia Benador, our senior policy advocate for CCOF. Laetitia has been with CCOF for many years and came onto our team as a researcher, as someone who was passionate about organic policy and wanted to push forward an organic agenda, specifically here in California. And she helped co-author our roadmap to an organic California, which is 2 documents that helped outline the benefits of organic and why we should be investing in organic at the state and federal level, and then a political roadmap for how to push organic forward in California. And now she gets to lead a lot of the initiatives that support producers making those goals. So Laetitia, I'll turn it over to you and we can get started. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jessie. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. Again, my name is Laetitia. I'm the Senior Policy Advocate at CCOF. So today we're discussing my very favorite food in the whole world. That would be organic dairy. I'm so honored to be shepherding this conversation. All dairy puns are welcome. You can feel free to put them in the chat. I grew up in Switzerland and my nanny was a dairy farmer. So my parents would drop me off every day and then they would drive to town to go to work. So I have developed a love for dairy since I was very little. My parents tell me I used to beg them to put fondue in my baby bottle. I was like that kid eating whole blocks of cheese and butter, sticks of butter. So it runs deep in my blood, my ancestry, and I've also myself worked with small goat and cow dairy, and I know of no better way to start the day than milking in a warm barn with sleepy animals. It's just the sweetest thing. So to kind of get us grounded before we really dive in, I just wanted to start with like a little story of the origins of dairy and the relationship between grasslands and cows. So for millennia around the world, wild and domesticated large herbivores have grazed grasslands, including all over California. We actually have a major amount of our state that is in rangeland that has been grazed for a very long time. And so back around 7,000 years ago, as shepherds would walk along with their herds, they would carry milk in bladders that were made from the animals' stomachs. And there's a substance called rennet that's present in the stomach of a class of herbivore called ruminants, which include cows and goats and sheep and deer and such. And that rennet is what causes the milk to curdle, to turn into these little clumps, which is the basis of the cheese making process. So that is kind of the origin story as far as we kind of understand it of cheese. So it runs very, very long and deep in the history of humans and food and our ecosystems. And today, organic dairy farmers manage their herds on these same lands that have been grazed and walked by shepherds for a very long time. So that's kind of to get us grounded in the history of this. And then to bring us to today, organic dairy farmers are innovating, are moving dairy into, kind of new phases, new spaces, but they're also facing some big challenges. The climate is changing. Drought and flooding is impacting forage availability, reducing the grazing season, and has led in some years to very dangerously low supplies of hay and very high prices. To the point where actually a couple of years ago, conventional farmers were purchasing organic hay because there was such a lack of conventional hay. There are also have been major supply chain disruptions over the last few years, resulting from global wars, trade disputes, and of course the pandemic. That is completely out of the hands of the dairy farmer, and that has a major impact. There are threats to grazing lands and efforts to ban animal agriculture in Sonoma County that threaten the future existence of the last remaining small organic family dairies in California. There's kind of a chronic lack of investment in organic supply chains, right? As so much investment has been poured into conventional supply chains, a lack in organic that has led to insufficient production of organic livestock feed. And really, all of these factors have led to rising costs of production between 30, 50% or more over the last couple of years. Of course, not a comparable rise in the price of milk coming back to the farmer. So organic dairy has had its fair share of challenges. But I don't want to leave you with the story of doom and gloom, because actually, over the last couple of years of working together, the organic dairy community has come together in a way that I don't know that I've seen any other part of the agriculture community come together. It is very remarkable. Coalitions formed, led by Straus and others. Dairy farmers came together to share data and information and lobby our state and our federal governments. We actually created the first ever organic commodity relief program ever for dairy, and we have had other kinds of wins together as well. So I think the organic dairy community is quite remarkable, and it's now time to hear a little bit more from them. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to the real heroes of the hour. So Mr. Albert Straus is the founder of Straus Family Creamery. Yes, yes, yes.
Hi.
He is an organic dairy farmer who grew up in Marshall, California, and converted his family farm, Straus Dairy Farm, to organic in 1994. That was 2 years after I was born. Becoming the first certified organic dairy farm west of the Mississippi River. Wow. In that same year, he also founded the Straus Family Creamery, the first 100% certified organic creamery in the US, and the first creamery in North America to be non-GMO project verified. Albert has been a leader in sustainable organic farming for decades, a true advocate for family farms, for paying farmers for the true cost of production, and for climate positive dairy practices. Very remarkable. So glad to have you. And our other wonderful guest here is Mr. Joseph Button, the Vice President of Sustainability and Strategic Impact at Straus Family Creamery. He has worked there since 2016, and in his role, he implements best in industry practices related to environmental sustainability. He also works to ensure the generational viability of organic dairy farms by driving initiatives that improve the farm's ecological health and farmers' financial resilience I can attest to this. Yes, absolutely. And Joseph was instrumental in helping Straus secure true zero waste certification and establishing a new sustainability reporting methodology. That is super, super cool and important. Amazing achievements. So now, cheers to that. Yes. To kind of kick us off, and get to know each other a little bit better, I want to ask Joseph how would you describe Albert to somebody who doesn't know him?
Laetitia, thank you so much. I just want to first say that today I am drinking Throat Coat by my good friends down the street, TM. It's lemon echinacea. I like to load up before I mow the lawn on the weekends. There's a lot of allergy in grassland-rich Sonoma County, so here we go. So I love this question. I've been asked it before. I think I was asked it 2 years into my job at Straus, and it was overwhelming because it was framed as, how are you coming in behind Albert to carry on what he's carried? And I thought, you know what? Albert is going to do his thing for his entire life, and I'm just here to help him out as much as I can. He is such an amazing individual, and he's an organic legend. And I think that's what a lot of people want to know is, what is it like to work alongside a food system legend like Albert Straus? I think the first thing I want to say is he has such a drive for his vision of creating a thriving regional food system that's beneficial for the environment, for farmers, for the farming communities, rural communities, and for animals. And he has an uncompromising viewpoint about what a sustainable food system should look like. And I think for a lot of people, that can be overwhelming to have somebody with such a strong viewpoint. But Albert carries that well. And if he hadn't had such a great vision and an uncompromising viewpoint, you might not see organic dairy in California like it is today. Early on, when he was pioneering organic dairy in Sonoma County and Marin County, a lot of the other farmers in this region thought, well, here goes this crazy guy selling milk to yuppies in San Francisco, as it's been told by the other organic farmers now in our network. And today, 85% of the dairy farms in Marin and Sonoma County are certified organic. So a real trailblazer with a clear vision on sustainable organic food systems. He's a first-generation leader in the organic space. And I think that, like I said, might be intimidating to some, but Albert is such a nice guy. Every week for the office staff, he'll bring in pastries or fresh bread. He even will cut it up into bite-sized pieces so we can all share the right amount. He's just so kind that way. And he has a license plate holder that says, "Real dairymen wear Birkenstocks." Well, I can attest for Albert that is true. Socks and all, depending on your preference. I think another thing I love about Albert is that he loves ice cream. And I think the origin story of Straus Family Creamery is very much an origin story of Albert's love for ice cream. His most famous recipe lately that I don't think any of us has really figured out is he actually takes some of our ice cream, he microwaves it and melts it down and then adds a splash of coffee. And I'm trying to figure out the right ratio because there's some magic there, and he might drink it at any time of the day. So that's just a little insight into Albert and what it's like working with him. He's constantly driving for more for our food system, for the benefit of farmers and for the benefit of the environment. And it creates an inspirational environment for everybody that gets to work with him.
Yeah. Wow. That was great. I feel like I know you so much better now. Also, I really also like to put ice cream in my coffee, your ice cream. So
It's a thing.
yeah, it's great. So the next question is for Albert. Could you share more about what motivates you to support the work of organic and sustainability?
Well, first of all, thank you, Joseph, for such a glamorous and appreciative view of me. And, you know, think, first of all, Joseph has been a really great partner, a thought partner, and someone who can take my crazy ideas and make them into reality. And so I think, that goes to the heart of working as a team, working to really look at the bigger picture of how do we keep our farming and move our food and farming system into the future. And that's been kind of the North Star, our mission, which is my mission, to sustain family farms in Marin Sonoma County by providing high quality, minimally processed organic dairy products and help revitalize rural communities through education advocacy everywhere. I see opportunities on all of those aspects because we've lost most of our farms in the United States, dairy farms. We went from 4.6 million dairy farms down to 26,000 today. And this is last year was the first year that most of the 65% of the cows are living on over 1,000 cow dairies. So our herd size is 275 cows, and the 13 dairies that supply us in Marin Sonoma County. So, but what drives me is it's what I love to do. I love farming. I love animals. I love the place I live and the community I live in. And so as I look at my neighbors and seeing how I can sustain them as part of my community and our community, this is what my passion is driven by.
Thank you for sharing, Albert. That was beautiful. I'll turn that question to Joseph now about what motivates you to do this work.
When you first sent this question along, I was overwhelmed by it. I think there's so much to say, but we don't have enough time for all of it. So I'll try to boil it down. Food and drink, it connects all of us. It's our common hobby. We all eat every day. We all drink every day. And it's critical to our survival as humans. So I think if there's any issue that can bring us together to create a more equitable and sustainable world, it's food and our food system. And it's critical that we make our food system, especially on the farming side, equitable so that farmers can continue to steward the land that they manage. And we know through organic agriculture that can be done in incredible ways that has co-benefits for human health, rural communities, and farms themselves. And so I'm so passionate about it because of that. There's so much potential there. And I like to think of sustainable organic agriculture as like a highway. We're trying to build a highway to a more sustainable world. And this is the main road that's going to help us get there because it's something that we all can attach to. There's so many rich stories that come along with it. And at the end of the day, it benefits people when we can produce healthy food on healthy land. And it's a cause worth living for.
Oh, beautifully said. And actually a beautiful transition into the next question, which is for you again, Joseph. And if you could talk to us about how certified organic producers are regenerating that land.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a common misconception out there, and I doubt many of the folks that have called in have this, but that organic agriculture is just about the knots. We don't put pesticides and herbicides on all our crops to produce our food, and we're not using petroleum-based chemicals to drive productivity. There's so much more than that. Organic agriculture is the heart of regenerative farming. And the National Organic Program and the enabling legislation that went behind it, it mandated stewardship of the soil and farm ecosystems. It's in there, and you got to dig to find it. But when you see the law as a whole, you see that it's painting this beautiful, elaborate picture that allows for organic to build out regenerative systems. So let's talk about what that means practically. Every organic farm has to have an organic systems plan that's reviewed and audited and inspected to ensure compliance with the law. The law being that the farmers are adding health to the soil year over year using on-farm resources and building the biodiversity of their farm system so that it regenerates itself on its own. And this has always been a core tenet of organic agriculture. And this is the work that producers are doing every day. Albert isn't just making milk, he's managing around 500 acres of grassland. And when you look at the benefits that his soil has after 30 years of doing this, it's really incredible. We talk about metrics like soil organic matter, and most people are lost on that. But when the average soil organic matter in the US agricultural system is 3 to 4%, and Albert's kind of sponging around on 15% out in his pastures, we know that regeneration is happening because of all the organic practices that he's been implementing over the years. And regeneration, it's not just about doing or implementing one practice to restore a degraded landscape. It's about implementing a suite of practices through the organic systems plan, so that you can create a whole ecosystem of practices that work together. So in our case with Organic Dairy Farm, it's adding compost to grasslands. It's planting trees to restore forestry areas. It's planting hedgerows and windbreaks along pastures, so that moisture stays in the soil longer and you have longer grass seasons and more photosynthesis. And it's doing all these practices in concert, so that not only is Albert regenerating through the practices, but the land begins to regenerate itself in a natural ecosystem. And it's really incredible and beautiful. And when you're able to see it happen, it's really something that is worthwhile, and it makes you feel proud of where your food comes from. So I think I'll stop there so I don't take up all the time, but that's just one way that organic producers are regenerating the land. And Albert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
I
just want to add that animal welfare is a basic tenet of organic certification and organic farming, as well as just building soil, building having healthy crops, producing healthy food. In our case, milk from our farms that goes into our products. So it's we see the benefits of organic milk compared to other milk, compared to plant-based alternatives. We see complete proteins, natural calcium. So there's a lot of health benefits. No hormones or antibiotics are allowed in dairy production. So it's yes, there are what's not in it, but it's also how it creates human health and benefit not only to humans but to the planet.
And that reminded me, I think most of you have heard this, but the organic animals, the organic cows themselves, play a critical role in co-managing the regeneration of the land. So Albert, as a dairy farmer, can manage his animals in such a way that they help restore and build soil. And he does that primarily through intensive rotational grazing practices, which Laetitia, you mentioned early on, was kind of part of the natural ecosystems of these grasslands. So bringing the animals together in tighter herds in smaller paddocks or sub pastures, so that the animals eat the grass that's there and then move on to a new pasture and allow for rest of the land, approximately 30 to 45 days. That practice alone builds soil and regenerates the farmscape. And it's really a critical piece and a component of an organic dairy system.
Yeah, and managing that grass is encouraged in organic because organic livestock producers have to graze their livestock for the duration of the grazing season, whatever that is in their local area.
It's actually more, Laetitia, is actually more than that. Dairy livestock have to maximize the time they're in pasture and outdoors with a minimum of getting most of their pasture, their ration, their feed from pasture for at least 120 days. But they are not allowed to be excluded from the outdoors or pasture except for weather, soil health, animal health, and water quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Albert. So moving into some of the challenges facing the organic dairy industry over the last few years, some of them are related to challenges with grazing, actually. So maybe we can start with that and then move into some of the other challenges. Whoever wants to take that.
Can we talk a little bit about the bigger picture and how we're trying to create a model of a carbon neutral organic dairy farm model that's
Sure.
about 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, I gave a goal to Joseph to be carbon neutral on my dairy by the end of 2022 and expanded to the other dairy suppliers to be carbon neutral by 2030. So the 4 practices are feeding. We were the first commercial trial for feeding red seaweed to cows in the United States by feeding a 1/4 pound and 45-pound diet and get up to 95% reduction in enteric methane, which is half the methane from the cows. The other half is from manure from the lagoons that are anaerobic, and we've been capturing that gas and using it as fuel for a generator and producing our electricity for the farm for the last 20 years. And then we talked about carbon farming, but we were the first dairy in the United States to have a carbon farm plan by adding compost land and using animals to intensively rotational graze. We're pulling carbon from the atmosphere and putting it back in soil, and those practices are being recognized internationally as one of the only ways to reverse climate change rather than reduce it. And the last piece is that I've tried to get off fossil fuel on the farm. So I've been driving an electric car for 20 years, but also converted our feed truck, the truck that feeds the cows, to fully electric 8 years ago, with the idea that the cows are pounding the truck that feeds them. And we just converted a full-scale loader to electric 3 years ago. So it's something that between all these practices, the milk coming from our farms will have an equal or lower carbon footprint than any plant-based dairy alternative. And it's creating a model that's being featured internationally as a carbon neutral dairy farm model. So I think that's something that's really, we're looking at the positive impact we can have on the planet and our communities. So that's something I feel very proud of, and thank Joseph for helping me get through this whole thing.
Right.
Happen. And you can't see it behind me, but the equation for that formula, it's all right up here. Those are all the practices. And that's such an important piece of what we're doing at Straus, to develop this model and embedded in that goal, which is completely overwhelming and daunting at some time, but I really think we have visibility and the ability to meet it by 2030. But embedded in that goal is the Organic Systems Plan and the Carbon Farming Program, which helps us and helps farmers against drought. Because as you build soil and you build soil organic matter, your soil has the ability to hold on to the moisture that it does receive during the year. Now in Sonoma County, Marin County, we get rain during the rainy season, which is November 15th to, maybe March 15th in a normal year, which apparently doesn't exist anymore, thanks to climate change. But when you get all your rain in one period of the year, you need your soil to hold on to that moisture so you can have an extensive grazing season. And what we saw starting around, I think it was 2020, was a second elongated period of drought in the Western US. And I have no doubts that that elongated drought was in part driven by our changing climate. And it's interesting, on Albert's farm, during that drought period, he actually had his best grass production years ever. He was growing more grass than ever despite the drought, because of all of this work, organic farming work, carbon farming work that he had done over the years. But outside of our local dairy ecosystem are the farms that supply our dairies with additional feed. Think alfalfa, oat hay, and other forages. And those farms, which come from Nevada and Northern California and Southern Oregon, they really suffered from the drought. And it led to a drought-induced feed crisis for the dairy farms in our region. Essentially, it was basic economics. There was a lack of feed, which drove prices up, quite incredibly, higher than we had ever seen by a wide margin. And that immediately impacted the bottom line for organic dairy farms. And as Laetitia mentioned earlier, prices were high across the board, but conventional dairy farmers were even buying organic feed because alfalfa prices across the state, conventional organic, were so high. And so there was a supply challenge. Farms had to feed their animals less. And on top of that, there was an international crisis over grain imports between the war in Ukraine and USDA's trade war with the Indian government. That led to incredible pressures on organic dairy farms across the country, but especially in the West. And overnight, we saw the economics for these farmers flip upside down, where the cost of production for 100 pounds of milk was around $40 to $45 per that 100 pounds, whereas the pay prices ranged from $31 to $37. Farmers were losing money. Farmers were going out of business. And so it was a really scary time. And in the industry, we can't react fast enough to change the price of milk on shelf. And even if we did, we would have had to raise it, I don't know, 25, 30%. And that would have been seen with mass consumer rejection. So that's when we partnered with so many amazing folks from the organic industry to help stem the tide of what was coming, which was a prolonged crisis in organic dairy. And so Albert and I, we went to the USDA hand in hand with Laetitia and folks from the Organic Trade Association and others to say, we're facing an issue. We can't get on top of this alone. We need support. And so that's what led to eventually the USDA for the first time creating a relief grant program for an organic commodity where they put forward $100 million to see shared across the 2,500 organic dairy farms in the US. And it literally saved hundreds of organic dairy farms. It definitely saved farms in our community. But that crisis continued, and I think there's more to share about that in the next question. Albert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, normally feed costs on a dairy are around 50% of their income. And when we saw feed costs go up to 65 to 70%, I think our dairies lost an average of $250,000 in the last year. And so this is something that's been a crisis that, it's been essential to get some relief and some help to help us through this. And we're still dealing with the challenges, the hole that all the dairies have. And the biggest disproportionately is affecting the next generation dairy farmers versus the ones that have been in business for years and have built up equity. Mm-hmm. So with no equity or very little equity, it's been a crisis for the next generation and succession.
Yeah, so we've had this dark cloud and we've been fighting through it. And I think we're starting to see some glimmers of hope. Feed costs from off-farm are starting to come down. Farmers are continuing to do more and more on-farm to harvest existing forage and spread it throughout the year. And then there's programs that the federal government and state government are investing in, like the TOP program. I don't remember what it's called, Transitioning Organic Partnership, something along those lines, which is helping build more organic grain and forage production in the US to support the whole organic ecosystem, especially feeding into organic dairy.
Yeah. And could you speak a little bit about how Straus partnered with CCOF and our foundation and policy around hardship assistance as well during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so everybody knows, this question is really just as much for Laetitia herself, since she played such an amazing role in this. But when we started to see this crisis, we also, in addition to reaching out to the feds, we reached out to the state of California. And what we had realized was existing relief programs that the state had for farmers facing drought or flood hardship did not meet the needs of dairy farms. Dairy farms are really interesting. You can have a small dairy farm. They have a huge revenue base compared to crop farms, but they also have a huge spend base as well. So, you know, let's just, for example, take a crop farm. Let's say their revenue is maybe $80,000 a year, but costs are $30,000. Whereas with an organic dairy farm, that's small. Cost might be $5 million and revenue $5.1 million. So there's just, it's a much bigger scale. And because of that, the state guidelines didn't meet organic dairy. So we got together, we lobbied the state, we talked to all the people that needed to be talking to. We talked to State Senator McGuire and other assembly members, and we said, we need help to redraft these rules. And we need to do it now so we can get state funding to these producers that are facing hardship. We were able to do that. I think it took an amazing feat of strength, but people heard our voice and they understood the challenge, and we were able to partner together and make that work happen. And at the end of the day, that funding flowed through a program called CUSP. I'm not going to remember the whole acronym. Laetitia, what is it?
The California Underserved and Small Producer Program. Yeah,
so it flowed through CUSP. And let me just say, as an individual who works with organic farmers to help them get grants, sometimes a grant can be a curse because it takes all sorts of management. It can be hard to apply, but CCOF has done such a good job when they've been selected to help administer grants to make it as easy as possible for farmers to apply and reduce administrative burden. Long story short, 6 of our 12 farmers in our network were able to access these funds. And for some of them, it was additional funds that kept them in business during this crisis. We're obviously super appreciative of all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joseph. That was quite a feat. We had to do a lot of educating at CDFA around dairy. There's really not a lot of knowledge about dairy, let alone organic dairy. Organic dairy is very different, right? Average conventional herd size is 1,200 cows, I believe. Albert, correct me if I'm wrong. That is not the case on an organic dairy. You mentioned earlier, average size might be 275 cows or something like that. So we had a lot of education to do, but we were able to get the funds. And I do want to make a plug for everyone here that this CUSP program that Joseph was just mentioning is being cut in the governor's budget fully. They are proposing to completely defund this program, which is the only lifeline that the state provides to support small farms. And as I've heard Albert and Joseph say many times, once a dairy farm goes out of business, it is not coming back. That's it. And so this program is really critical. And we are going to drop a link in the chat. I will do that as soon as I can to provide an opportunity for you all to raise your voice and tell the state that this program is really important and we need to fund it in the governor's budget this year. Yay, thank you, Jesse, for doing that. I appreciate that. Okay, is there anything else, Albert, that you wanted to add around any of the hardship assistance stuff before we move on?
Not on that point right at the moment.
Okay, great. And I also do want to plug that the CCOF Foundation has hardship assistance that we fundraise for also separately of the CUSP program. So we do have that open right now, but we need the CUSP program to impact more farmers. Okay, so I think we're doing okay on time. Go to the
I'm out of tea,
last
but
question.
I think we are doing good. 20 minutes is awesome.
Oh no, quick refill. All right, so Albert, this is a pretty fun question. Are there any misconceptions about organic dairy that you would like to address publicly?
I think that the misconception, well, I think the opportunity is that, yes, there are bad practices and animals can be a problem for air quality and soil. Excuse me, and water quality, but essentially organic dairies and our solutions to climate change are an asset. Well, manures and compost are actually an asset for organic dairies. They're the main nutrients and main fertilizers for crops, and actually has a bigger purpose other than just dairy, because a lot of the compost are made with manures. So that's one misconception. The other thing is, I think that we're proving that organic dairies can be a solution to climate change and can be, something that's a positive part of our farming and food system, and that we can make, we can be the basis of building back rural communities and local food systems. I'll stop there. We have a lot of education to do, because I think that there's been a disconnect between the public and farms and the practices. And so we're working on how can we get more educational programs going, on farm programs, where we're talking about the practices and the businesses of farming and what they produce, and as well to school children.
Yeah, it's super important. I think, what is it, less than 2% of the American population farms nowadays?
I think it's down to 1%.
1%. Okay, yeah. So there is a lot of opportunity for people to rebuild that relationship with where their food comes from. And so kind of on that note, we encourage everyone who's joining us today to please submit your questions into the chat now. This is a unique opportunity to pick the brains of two wonderful pioneers of organic dairy. And I'll start with the first one that I see in there. What misconceptions do people have about plant-based agriculture that creates confusion about dairy?
Well, I think that a lot of plant-based dairy alternatives are not about it's not it's a replacement for milk. It's people, yes, there are people that can't digest milk, but actually we've over the decades we've found that people can digest our milk that can't digest other milk, and so going plant-based is trying to fill a gap that I feel that is not necessarily around health, but an alternative to dairy that has had a bad reputation in the past. And so I think that it's not necessarily, we're trying to prove that we can have dairy farms and milk actually have a lower carbon footprint than a plant-based as well. Joseph probably has something to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's right, Albert. I sometimes buy oat milk and have it in my fridge, and what I do make sure with any dairy alternative is to make sure it's not full of crap. That's super unhealthy for you. And those beverages do exist, and that's great. I'm a big fan of optionality. But there is a misconception out there that we need to have dairy alternatives because dairy will destroy our climate and make this earth uninhabitable for humans. I think that's kind of the idea that's out there in society. What Albert and I are out here to prove is, no, that's not true. One, you can have a climate neutral or carbon neutral, climate positive dairy system. We're proving it, and many others are proving it. We're not the only kids on the block here. But that, you know, that aside, is a drink that also provides a lot of health. We're talking about nutrition. And globally, livestock agriculture is necessary for nutrition, and especially in a lot of impoverished communities around the world. So being able to present a model of agriculture, a model of dairy that is good for the climate, while continuing to provide nutrition, is great. And I saw that as another question. Organic milk has been shown to have a lot of nutritional benefits above and beyond conventional milk. So, you know, this is really beyond me, but things like more omega-3 fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acids as well, antioxidants, without having influence of pesticides and growth hormones and other things that may show up in conventional milk. So that's really exciting to have this story where you have nutrition plus climate benefit, and it's here today. It's something that's being offered in the marketplace. And I think it's a solution that we need to continue to pedal forward. The pragmatic reality is dairy demand globally continues to increase. So as a sustainability professional, somebody who's tasked with mitigating climate change, sometimes you just have to look in the mirror and say, this is what people are eating and are demanding. Yes, we can shift our diets to eat more plants, because guess what? Salads are great and we should eat more of that. We all should have gardens in our backyard. Albert does. He eats salads all the time, and so do I. But at the same time, in our balanced diet and getting more nutrition in the market, we can have dairy as well. So it's an important thing to remember, to speak against that misconception, because as we're creating a food system for the future, we have to create one that has solutions to meet the demands of consumers today. And that's just the hard reality, which is why we're really focused on what we're doing.
I wanted to add to that as well. You know, I think there's been a drive for a vegan diet to be a solution to climate change in the world and feeding the world. I think it's misguided, and the World Health Organization says animal products are essential to feeding the world population. The other part of it is, as we're now importing half our fruit, a third of our vegetables, 80% of our lamb, or 90% of our seafood, 11 or 12% of our beef, we're exporting our effects on climate change. So how can we make a sustainable local food system that really does it sustainably and feeds our own population?
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a question in the chat. Can you give any advice to a beginning farmer going organic?
I do that all the time. You know, it's very dependent on, I think there's a bigger picture of how do you kind of set up a business. Recognizing that farms are businesses, I think is one of the things that a lot of people do it out of the passion of wanting to be a farmer, and but ultimately it has to be economically viable. What we've done is try to create a collaboration between our creamery and the dairy farmers, where we have hand delivered our milk checks twice a month to create a relationship and a understanding of farming. And then 4 times a year get together with all the farmers and talk about how the creamery is doing, the opportunities, challenges on the farms, but ultimately agree on a volume per farm that's in line with our sales, so we don't have extra milk to sell off at a loss. And that way we are able to usually pay 10 to 15% more than any of our competitors. But for new next generation farmers. So that whole idea of getting a price and benchmarking a price that sustains farming and farmers is to create, so to enable farmers to pay themselves as managers of their own business, look at improving their infrastructure and succession to the next generation. So we're doing all these pieces, but we have more to do. We actually we just received a grant, which part of it is Joseph and I are going to work with Chico State organic dairy program to create help the next generation of organic dairy farmers. So there's different things we're doing to kind of help them along as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. Really important as there's a large change in the farming population happening right now in American agriculture for us to really be thinking about supporting the next generation and also just passing along all the wisdom that comes through years and years of experience on the land, working with animals. So the next question here in the chat is about your organic practices. Can you be more specific about how you rebuild soil? How do you compost? What do you compost? What seeds do you plant? What kind of hedgerows do you plant?
Okay, that's pretty expensive. So so we bed the cows. We use rice hulls and straw, and so we clean the barns daily, and but springtime we have very little manure because cows are on pasture all the time, and very little just inside for milking. But we separate the solids from the liquids. The liquids go into the methane digester. The solids get hauled and composted. So we're adding more carbon material to that, more wood chips and stuff like that. So we make all our own compost on the farm, and apply that to the land. So that's one practice we do. All the manures go back on the land as fertilizer. The methane digester actually converts the nutrients to be more available to crops as well. The liquids which get put back on the land. We plant. We multi-purpose our pastures, so we not only graze them, but when in springtime when the grasses get ahead of us, we'll cut them for silage, which is like it's another way of preserving feed, and then we'll graze. But we use oats and rye and different. I've tried a 13 mix herbal blend that I'm trying out on one of the pastures, but just those type of practices, and really looking at rotational grazing. And we're working with a satellite company out of New Zealand to quantify the growth in our pastures and be able to use it as a way to validate that we're growing pastures as a crop, and quantifying that for certification as well. I don't know if that's answering the question, but
you forgot the hedgerow part, Albert.
Hedgerow. Yeah, I've been planting a lot. It's mostly natives. There has been a local program through between Zero Footprint that assesses restaurants for doing carbon sequestering practices, compost application, and hedgerows. And before that, Straw is through the Point Blue conservation, that we're planting mostly native shrubs and trees. So I've been doing some other extra stuff on my own, like planting redwoods, coastal redwoods and different things like that.
Wow, that's really exciting.
There are also bee pollinator plants and stuff like that. So and I'm trying to get more monarchs back to it. So
yeah, That's really important. Can you, you know, I think most people wouldn't even imagine all this happening on a dairy farm, right? And like, here we are talking about monarchs um, with dairy farmers. So I think we have time for one more question. I really like this question from Olga in the chat to speak to how we can increase the number of small and mid-sized processors in the US. There are microprocessors and large buyers and processors, but how do we get more Straus-sized processors to support more competition and market options for our organic producers?
So until the pandemic, we had built up in Sonoma in the North Bay 30 little cheesemakers, and now we're down under 10. But we need to start building small scale. We supply milk to 3 different small scale cheese producers. It's part of our trying to start to build the dairy processing and dairy brands that are out there. I think it's going to take a lot of effort to make a economically viable farm system. There's a lot of people that want to make, you know, cheese or other dairy products, but it's really hard to make it economically viable and get the capital needed to start out. So we're working to see how we can support these small scale producers. Chelsea, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I think the heart of the question is how do we also replicate the Straus Creamery model in other areas around the country? What are your thoughts there, Albert?
Yeah, and I think we worked with Olga and back east to try to see how we can, how we can help them get organic milk into schools, which we've been doing, and be able to start building sales. There's a whole farm to school program that's been promoted by the first partner in California, and putting money against it, Alice Waters, and I forgot it's called Turning Green, but there's a whole effort to get organic foods in all the schools in California. And so that's something that we've been trying to help promote. I think that's a model that can be replicated around the country. So I think that's something that could be good. Conscious Kitchen, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for adding that into the chat. That's great. Well, here we are. We're at the end of our hour drinking tea together. Just want to thank Albert and Joseph so much for being here. You are both pretty much legends in the organic community. The work that Straus is doing to be a model for organic dairy is so inspiring. And I and CCOF are very committed to helping the dairy community overcome challenges and support them in moving towards models like Straus. We want to see organic dairy have a really solid, thriving future. So thank you all so much for being with us, for being in conversation with us. If we didn't get to your question, we are so sorry. Please email CCOF Foundation at ccof.org, and we'd be happy to follow up with you. If any of you feel so moved to support our efforts around dairy hardship relief in the state, there is a link to that in the chat. Please speak up. And just in general, wishing everyone a wonderful end of your day. Cheers to dairy.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Laetitia.
we'll
Thank
see you all
everybody.
later.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you all.
Laetitia. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.